Ever get that feeling, like when you see those headlines about crazy divorce battles
Oh, yeah.
and you just assume it's going to be about like celebrities and their yachts and stuff? Well, today's deep dive
Yeah.
throws those assumptions right out the window.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this case, Mallory v. Mallory, is that on the surface it seems like totally normal, right? Just a regular divorce.
Right.
We're talking about Cynthia and Scott Mallory.
Just your average couple going through a separation, trying to figure out the whole custody and support payments thing.
Exactly. And that's actually what makes it so fascinating. This case is like a cautionary tale. It shows how even those everyday disagreements can spiral out of control, especially with the legal system involved. Things can get messy.
Yeah, and we've got the judge's rulings for this one. So we're going to get right into his head and how he saw this whole thing unfold. And let me tell you, this judge, he does not hold back. He actually calls out the husband's actions, says he inflicted upon the wife considerable and unnecessary expense.
Wow.
So how does a normal divorce turn into like a full-blown legal battle?
Well, they had the separation agreement back in '94, that document where couples lay out who gets what after the split. And at first, it seemed pretty straightforward. Cynthia got custody of the kids, Scott starred in the house they were building, and they agreed on a temporary support payment of $300 a month.
Okay, $300 a month
Until
until...
the house was sold, it was like a temporary thing.
Makes sense. Trying to keep things amicable, especially with kids involved.
Exactly. But, and this is key, this agreement had a clause, kind of like a what happens next clause. It said once that house was sold, Cynthia could ask for more support payments.
Oh, I see. So it's like a ticking time bomb if they're not on the same page.
That's a great way to put it. And, well, you can probably guess what happened. Scott buys out Cynthia's share of the house in September of '95, and boom, that clause kicks in. But even though Cynthia's lawyer tried to address these increased payments, Scott just didn't.
He just ignored it. What was he thinking? Did he think it would just go away?
Who knows? But ignoring those requests definitely didn't make things go away. Actually, it made everything worse. Because fast forward to September of the next year, Cynthia files for divorce, officially asking for permanent custody and, of course, those child and spousal support payments.
Okay, so it's getting real now.
Oh, yeah. And remember that original agreement they had? Well, Scott responds to this divorce filing with his own motion, and get this, he wants joint custody.
Wait, really? But they'd already agreed on that. Talk about a curveball. Did the judge find that a little suspicious?
Absolutely. The judge even pointed out in his ruling that Scott hadn't shown any real reason why their initial agreement should be overturned. Like, nothing had changed.
So already we're seeing some, let's call it, interesting behavior.
Yeah, interesting. And it doesn't stop there. Over the next year, the case is just bogged down with motions, adjournments, you name it. We're talking mountains of paperwork, delays. I can't imagine how stressful it was for everyone.
Especially for the kids. It's easy to forget that there are real people at the center of these legal battles. It's not just paperwork, it's their lives.
You're telling me. And then to make things even more interesting, Scott decides to represent himself in court starting in April of '97.
Oh boy, that's brave. Even if you know the law, court is tricky. And when you're emotionally invested, yikes.
Tell me about it. So finally, after more than a year of this back and forth, the case goes before the judge.
Okay, so let's talk rulings. Did the judge side with the wife? I mean, she was the one who seemed to be following that initial agreement.
He did when it came to custody. He stuck with the existing arrangement because, as he put it, that liberal and generous access to the children outlined in the separation agreement seemed to be working out just fine, even based on Scott's own words.
So consistency wins round one. What about the support payments? That's what this whole thing really hinges on, right?
Oh, absolutely. That seemingly simple request for an increase, well, that's what turned into this whole legal mess. So, with child support, the judge sided with Cynthia, ordering Scott to pay $670 per month based on his 1997 income.
Which, if I'm remembering correctly, Scott tried to downplay a bit. Like he tried to use an average income over 3 years.
Yep, try to pull a fast one, but the judge wasn't buying it.
Didn't work.
Nope. And spousal support. Cynthia was granted $800 a month. The judge recognized she was unemployed and needed that financial support, especially given, everything else going on.
So far, it sounds like the judge is just trying to be fair. Untangle this web of motions and arguments and come to a reasonable outcome. But something tells me this is where things get really interesting.
Oh, you have no idea. Because here's the thing. The rulings themselves might seem straightforward, but how this judge dealt with the legal costs, That's what makes this a deep dive. He went way beyond just, okay, you pay this, you pay that. He dug into both of their conduct, especially Scott's, and his decisions. Let's just say they send a message.
Okay, I am ready for this. This is where that whole unnecessary expense comment comes in, right? Let's get into it. Why was this judge so bothered by this guy? And how did this normal divorce become a cautionary tale about legal battles?
So remember how Cynthia offered to settle back in October of 97?
Right.
The judge, he really honed in on that. He wanted to know, was that offer still good when they were back in court in November?
Which is a good question, because a lot had happened by then. Motions, delays, the whole 9 yards. So the judge is looking for any sign that Scott had tried to, be reasonable, save everyone time and money.
Exactly. And get this, the judge decided that, yeah, Cynthia's offer was still valid, even after all that. And here's the kicker. The judge found that the actual outcome, like the rulings he made on support payments and all that, were actually better for Cynthia than her own settlement offer.
Oh, wow. So he basically ended up with the worst deal by not settling. Talk about irony.
It gets better. The judge called Scott out, said he had plenty of chances to avoid this whole fiasco, and not just his own fees, Cynthia's too. He even said he thought Scott's actions weren't just careless, but seemed like he was purposely dragging things out.
So it's not even about the money anymore. It's the principle. This judge is seeing a pattern of behavior here. He's not going to let it slide.
Exactly. And this is where the legal costs get really interesting. Usually the court can make the loser pay party and party costs. It's like a portion of the winner's legal fees.
Okay, hold on. Legal jargon alert. What does that even mean? Party and party costs.
It's like a discount on your legal bills.
Right.
The court uses these guidelines, which are usually outdated, to figure out how much the loser has to chip in. But it's almost never the full amount.
Right, right.
But then there's solicitor-client costs. That's the big one.
Oh, boy. And what happens there?
That's where the loser has to pay for every single thing, every meeting, every document, the whole shebang. It's basically saying, you really messed up, now you're going to pay for it, literally. And the judge in this case, he actually went on this whole thing about how maybe they should be using solicitor-client costs more often, especially in family law, to make people think twice about being difficult.
It's true. Sometimes you need that financial incentive to encourage people to settle.
Exactly. And you can tell this judge is frustrated because he goes out of his way to explain all this. He even calls out the guidelines for party and party costs as being, like, completely useless.
Yeah, I imagine those haven't been updated in a while.
Right. So what he did was Cynthia's party and party costs on a percentage of her total solicitor-client costs. Basically said, forget those old rules. Let's make the costs actually reflect what really happened.
He's like, I'm going to fix this myself.
Right. And it gets better. The judge points out that Scott never even made a formal settlement offer.
Seriously? Not even a try?
Nope. Nothing on record. And the judge did not like that. He even says maybe Scott just didn't want to settle. Or maybe, and this is interesting, maybe he didn't even understand the legal stuff enough to even try. Remember, this is a guy who decided to be his own lawyer.
Oof. That's a tough one. Makes you wonder if he really knew what he was getting himself into.
Right. And then the judge says that not even trying to settle, especially when you're the one who started the whole thing, he says that could be seen as abusing the court process.
Wow. Strong words.
Yeah, he's not messing around. So how about those cross-examination costs? We haven't forgotten about those, have we?
Yeah, those were kind of a head-scratcher for me.
Right, because usually the side that asks for the cross-examination, they're the ones who have to pay for it, which would be Cynthia in this case.
But the judge is kind of hinting that Scott's behavior played a role there, too.
Exactly. He's like, look, I can't say exactly how much of this cross-examination was because of Scott.
Right.
But I'm guessing at least half of it was necessary because he couldn't just hand over those financial documents like he was supposed to.
It's like he's saying, you made her ask those questions, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it all goes back to that pattern, not sticking to the agreement, delays, being evasive. It all costs money.
And time and stress.
Oh, absolutely. The judge even said he thought about really hitting Scott with even more costs, especially for that time before Cynthia made her offer. But in the end, he awarded Cynthia the full amount she asked for, just under $9,000.
Wow. That's not nothing. Yeah. The judge was definitely sending a message with that one. Like, don't mess around in my courtroom.
Yeah, like, this is not a game. And, it makes you think about the bigger picture here.
Totally.
It's easy to get caught up in the legal back and forth, but it's not just about the money. There are real people involved, real families.
It's kind of heartbreaking, you know. While this couple is duking it out in court, their kids are stuck in the middle. And yeah, we can put a price tag on legal fees, but what about the emotional cost? That's got to be huge.
Exactly. And that's something the judge seemed to get. Like, he could see how Scott's actions weren't just hurting Cynthia's bank account, but her life, her stress levels, her ability to just move on.
It's a good reminder for all of us. Even when we're in the right, sometimes choosing to fight tooth and nail can backfire.
Because sometimes the biggest cost isn't financial, right? It's the damage to relationships, to your own well-being.
So much truth in that. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Mallory v. Mallory, a case that shows us that even in something as complicated as family law, sometimes the simplest lessons are the most important.
Absolutely.
Don't forget those human costs. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep looking for those different perspectives, and maybe, just maybe, we can all find a way to understand each other a little bit better.